Okay, well, welcome back. It's Pheng again, he, him, his, with the Men and Masculine Folks Network. Again, coming to you live with some of the siblings that are here today as well too, Felix, Serrano, Sean, and Julianna, who is helping us with the tech support and also interacting with folks live at this moment via Facebook. If you're joining us on Facebook and watching us and participating, definitely welcome feedback. Conversations today as we continue our conversations. This is our 29th kitchen table conversations. Just a few folks, men and masculine folks, having conversations about everyday conversations and issues that we're being impacted by and how we navigate it in terms of the challenges around masculinity and manhood and those issues that are impacting our lives, to serve as a platform for others to continue these dialogues within their own homes or in their own networks or groups and peer support. So just wanted to refresh for everybody again, since it's our 29th conversation. And in case you're new, definitely check out our other conversations that we've had. And we're here every other Thursday from noon to 1. And we always are open to feedback, comments, and want to continue the dialogue with all of you as well too. But before we go on to today's topic or conversation that we're all going to have with one another here, pass it over to the siblings here to share themselves and what's been happening in their world first.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Felix Martinez. Pronouns are he, him, and his. I work for Esperanza United. Super happy to be here. Super happy to be in this conversation and this run about, this great group of positive folks. So super happy to be here.
Serrano Robinson. I use he, him, his pronouns. Out of Duluth. Just happy to be here. Kind of chilling and a little bit tired, but got some good energy today for this conversation. So thank you for having me.
Hey everybody, my name is Sean Hayes. Pronouns are he, him, and his, and I'm coming to you from Duluth, Minnesota, where it's sunny and chilly. And yeah, I'm a part of Menace Peacemakers, and just happy to be back with all of you. And yeah, it's just nice to reconnect, to be in space together, and to have these chats. So feeling grateful.
Thank you very much. And obviously, we want to continue the dialogue because if any of you are aware or not aware, or don't already know, it is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, hence me wearing some purple. If you all could see my purple in this video, if it looks good. But definitely show by representing, getting a purple ribbon if you haven't, from your local domestic violence organization. Help them out, contribute financially to them, find out who's providing what in your area. There's tons of programs throughout the state that are providing direct services to victims and survivors of domestic violence every day, 365 days a year. Some of them even have shelter programs as well too, meaning that they actually house people, emergency assistance, by providing emergency assistance that night or that hour or that day or 3 months from whatever happened and situation happened. So definitely reach out to the tireless ways that the advocates have been working. So I just really want to shout out to our colleagues in the field, quote unquote, who have been doing this work, who are advocates, and particularly women and femme folks and queer folks and gender non-conforming folks who are helping people who are experiencing domestic violence within their own homes and advocating and navigating them through the systems. And when I mean systems, I'm talking about like the social service systems, the government system, or whether it be the criminal justice system or the healthcare system even, and helping them navigate to get to resources and get what it is that they need and want, the kind of support that they would like, so that they can get to the next place that they want to in their life, whether it is in their own healing journey or whether it is for economic reasons. And we know that's so true So really want to honor and give space to the tireless efforts of our advocates and which is our colleagues who are doing this work tirelessly for some of them for more than 40 years since the domestic violence movement began, and for some of them just yesterday who just started and who was volunteering and was passionate and committed and wanted to do some work around domestic violence. So definitely take the time out, not only this month, but in the next few months, to contribute financially to the organizations that need that support and who are supporting domestic violence survivors and victims. We're always short. I know that we're always short on direct client assistance, quote unquote, meaning direct funding assistance to people who are experiencing domestic violence, because they really oftentimes come to us. And I mean us because we are men as peacemakers, whether it be them or the network, Men and Masculine Folks Network, or other programs that are adjacent to us and we work with. Survivors oftentimes come to our doors with just what they have on them, meaning just their backpack or just their clothes. So a lot of our resources actually go to support them financially, getting housing, getting a meal, a warm meal, being able to stay at a shelter, being able to stay at a hotel, motel for like a night or 2 nights just to get away from the person who's actually causing harm to them. So contribute financially. I just wanted to say that is contribute financially. Definitely do that really at what you can. It's that time of year again in terms of giving. Thanksgiving is quote unquote around the corner, the holidays are around the corner, I should say. So it is the season of giving. So definitely give financially. If you can't give financially, definitely go check out and support and volunteer with the local organizations in your area that are providing support for domestic violence survivors. Or you can learn how to become an advocate, right? Or you can go through whether it be domestic violence training or the 40-hour sexual assault training that the state requires as well too. So definitely a shout out to all of that so that folks can support Esperanza United, organizations like that. They do, you know, Felix works there and you can talk more about that as well too, but they do tons of good work within the Latino community, not just locally and statewide, but nationally as well too. So I just wanted to give a little bit of a time to really honor that and really honor the work of advocates, because they really oftentimes don't actually get seen and heard, right? So I don't know if any of you want to do some call outs at this moment or shout outs, and then I can continue to just want to share other insights and thoughts about some other folks as well before we continue our conversation.
Absolutely, Pheng. Thank you for that. Esperanza United has been working for the community now. Next year's gonna be 40 years providing services to Latinos and people experiencing violence. And it's interesting to see how, you know, from this small group of women who are looking for resources and looking for, you know, support, maybe they didn't speak the language almost 40 years ago. You know, we're able to create this organization right now that not only provide direct services, also work with policy. So to be sure, you know, policy research, technical assistance, just to provide support. And also now we're working with men, something that we started doing it probably around 6 years ago. So super happy to be working for Esperanza United, formerly known Casa Esperanza. If you want to find out a little bit more, go to esperanzaunited.org. It's a lot of great information. We have a crisis line. We're working with men to supporting, you know, our communities, men also experimenting violence. So please reach, like Penn said, to those organizations out there that are supporting. There's always space for, you know, for room to receive support, especially now when we're getting closer to the holidays. There's so much need. So yeah, you know, if there's any way you can support, just give them a call. And yeah, just reach to us if you need if you have any question, or if we can support any of you in any way. Thank you.
Yeah, and I was thinking of, there were like several people, most of them women or femme folks who came to mind, that I wanted to just shout out. Some of them, Sarah, Ashley, Amy Brooks, some of these folks who, have been doing this work for a long time. And, as someone who gets to, I don't work directly with survivors of this violence, men as peacemakers, doesn't provide those direct services in the ways that shelters do. But actually that's part of our origin story at Men as Peacemakers is, back in the mid 90s, there were several domestic violence homicides that happened here in Duluth. And, the story goes that at that time, there were a bunch of men, diverse men from all different communities who came together and said, we got to create something where where we can get involved in this and play a role in, preventing violence in our communities. And yeah, that was many years ago. And now the work, that we're doing is really about shifting environments and changing the ways that people believe and act and treat people. And yeah, it's I don't know. Yeah, I just appreciate Pheng you bringing that forward, because I think as someone, like I said, who doesn't oftentimes work with those survivors directly, getting to witness and observe these folks that I mentioned and many, many others, and the time and the energy and the compassion, they're answering phone calls in the middle of the night. They're on call all the time. And dealing with some really heavy, traumatic situations. And so I want to lift them up and say thank you and share gratitude.
Definitely. Yeah. They don't get enough appreciation and enough visibility because don't know how much, I myself used to be an advocate years ago when I started doing this work, and you don't get a lot. You experience and you see a lot, and you're with survivors oftentimes, but you learn a lot about the courageousness in survivors and how people, and particularly survivors, actually love the people that are in their lives, even those who are harming them, and the kind of forgiveness and ways in which they maneuver all of that within themselves. So a lot of teaching there, definitely, that they have taught me as an advocate, and while I'm helping supporting them, And I know that there's like tons of other like community groups that are popping up here and there over the last 40 some years since the domestic violence movement started as well too. And if you don't already know, a woman's advocate down here in St. Paul actually was one of the first few shelters that actually opened up around the country. So that's some historical knowledge for folks to know about and to understand how Minnesota actually plays a key role in the domestic violence world and arena, and not only creating the power and control wheel that came from the Duluth model up in the organization called Domestic Abuse Intervention Project up there in Duluth, but in many other ways as well too that we've played. So I think that our state does a really great job, and the people here are committed fully, for sure, in many ways and in small ways and in some ways to making sure that we actually are able to actually end domestic violence. That being said, just wanted to give a shout out and thanks again to the folks up in Alexandria. They had the opportunity yesterday to go and speak to two fabulous groups, one at Alexandria Technical and Community College, and talk to some of the law enforcement and nursing students there yesterday as well. So it was really good to be able to talk to second-year law enforcement students and nursing students who are thinking about going to their field and what does it mean to work with survivors of both domestic violence and sexual violence, and then going and participating in a luncheon that happens annually with the organization called United Communities Against Advocating for Nonviolence. UCAN is what they stand for in Alexandria, and it's just a bunch of folks in the community who are coming together and who are committed and passionate about advocating for nonviolence in their communities. and domestic violence being one of them. And it was actually started and founded by a man, and he was there, and his hope was to really engage and make sure that men were coming to the table. So it was well attended, and we had about 30%, 40% of the audience folks being men, and giving a talk about what does it mean for men to really practice masculinity. So giving a shout out again and a thank and appreciation for those folks for inviting us, me in particular, to go and join them and give some of my ideas and thoughts, some of what I've learned over the years, to share that with them as well too. Continuing on that conversation, I think it's notable and important for us to really continue the conversation on domestic violence, right? Because I think that it's such a important, complex issue that just one conversation alone 2 weeks ago between myself, Sean, and Serrano wasn't probably going to be enough. And I know we don't talk about it in these conversations enough as well too, because we're talking about other issues that are happening, and sometimes it shows up. But I think that, and I think that it's important for us to actually, in these moments, really name the kinds of complexities that we're talking about, and really discuss like what it actually looks like, right? What does domestic violence actually look like, and especially what in the conditions of an environment that allows for men in particular to make this actually cause harm. And when women, we've talked about this a number of times, when women use violence within intimate settings, is that then domestic violence too or not? So some of the things that we want to be talking about today in the next 45 minutes that we have. So tune in. So any thoughts on that first?
Well, I wasn't here last week, but yeah, I think it's very important to have these conversations, especially as men and also as parents, as brothers and sisters, and as community, to start creating awareness, because it happened a lot in our communities. I can share with you guys that I remember being little in Puerto Rico, and hearing sometimes the neighbors fighting, that you could see there was violence around, and we were taught to don't say anything, to that's not our problem, just let them deal with that. And it was something that, now growing up, start thinking about it, I realized that, through conversation, we could stop, that those situations are happening back in the day. And now we're able to have more resources. Now we have internet, we have so many other ways to communicate and start creating more awareness, and see how violence, happening in our community, sometimes not necessarily physical, but emotionally, that affect also a lot too. And those are the ones that don't leave marks, and you don't know when it's happening. So I'm very grateful to have this type of conversation. I have the opportunity now as a man and voice engagement coordinator for Esperanza United to have the conversation with the men and create awareness and understand that, how patriarchy works, and how a lot of men utilize that to take advantage, and how hard it's for them sometimes to let that go for a simple thing of being equal, So still men trying to take advantage of that, and what we need to do in order to break that. As a father of 2 daughters, I realize that I want that for my daughter to happen, so that they feel more comfortable, they feel respected, they feel treated equally. And there's a lot to do. It's a lot to do, and these opportunities are the ones that we need to take advantage to hopefully open those conversations at home. So after listening to this, say, when you're sitting with your friends in a bar, or at school, just to, hey, what do you think about this? So start recreating that awareness, start breaking that patriarchy that exists in our communities, and start making a difference and creating change. So yeah.
Yeah, I actually endured a conversation about just how we each come from different communities, and we all have seen it in our communities, right? So it's weird to me how for most people that domestic violence comes off as an isolated issue. An isolation literally means one. It means like by itself. It means like not a replica. And if a damn sure doesn't mean like recurring or repetition or over and over again. So it's kind of weird how like we'll be like, oh, it's an isolated issue, right? I was born in the Bronx, New York. There was just an isolated issue there. You know, you were born, Felix, if I get this right, I believe you said Puerto Rico. And there was another isolated incident there. And then the same thing for Sean and Pheng. Like these cannot all be isolated issues, right? It's clear that it's also not a coincidence, and it's more of like, I literally had the word in my head, but it's not, if it's not isolated, if it's just like, it's more of community based, but I'm struggling with words today, so I'm gonna try to figure it out. But yeah, it's for them sure not isolated, right? If every woman or every person like is sharing that same story, sharing the same way that they feel about it, sharing the same outcomes that are actually happening, then it's not like an isolated, it's not a one-off. It's more of like, you know what? With the gracious of today, I'm gonna let go of that word. So whatever I'm looking for, but it's just showing that it happens way too more often than what we think it is. It can't be an isolated incident if we've all had the same way, but just the only thing that's different is the location. The identity of the person is literally the difference of it. That's the only difference. The way the person is making them feel is no different. The way the person is acting towards them and the belief and the value that they have towards their partner or towards anybody that they're doing that to is no different. So I think just even having these conversations from different cultures like helps people understand like, no, it's not isolated, because they do happen in other cultures and it happens around the world. So this can't just be something that happens in one place. So we got to kind of look at it as a group more than just like, and I think that's also a tactic, right? Like, you know, you mind your business, I mind mine, and you know, you don't worry about what's happening over my 10-foot fence and vice versa, right? It's almost like a tactic for, honestly, for people not to even know what you're doing, right? Like just having that aura of like, yeah, we're in this just on our own, like one singular family. Like that's also like a tactic to keep the violence within the home, because nobody's ever really going to find out if that's how you feel and if that's how you act and if that's how you know, make the children feel. That's how you make everybody feel in the house. Like, no, this is just like here. Like, so I just endure like the conversations of having to hear people from different backgrounds and different places of the world like share the same like experiences or see the same experiences. It definitely should help people understand that it's not an isolated issue. It's more of an issue that we have to deal with as a community and come to it as a community as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think if I could piggyback off of that too, to what you're sharing there, Serrano, is that isolation and the incidences allow for, I think, for men to scapegoat and for men to be able to say, but I didn't do as bad as that guy over there, right? I only hit her, but at least I didn't kill her, right? Or the way in which we fought in our relationship was different than the way in which Felix and his partner fought. So therefore, probably mine doesn't qualify as domestic violence, but Felix's relationship qualifies. You know, so it does that. That's I think that talking about it as domestic violence incidences, instead of talking about it as the pattern that we were talking about last week and the pattern of control, allows us men to really scapegoat and really silo every time domestic violence happens, to really silo it and say, maybe it plays to the narrative that I shared a couple of weeks ago, of like it takes two to tango, right? Like that, maybe she didn't do something right. That's why, because that was what led to her being beat up, you know? And so I see that so much. In our work with men who come to our programs in domestic violence training or domestic violence programming. They'll say our situations are all different. But even though your situations are all different, to Serrano's point exactly, but you're all still here. You all got here somehow because you made some choice based on really deep-seated beliefs around what it means to be a man, around what it means to be masculine, around what men should be doing. And in the environment, it also allows for men to use violence with very little accountability, with impunity, right? And so there's actually a really good video out there. If any of you haven't seen it, it is actually produced in Minnesota. We'll try to see if we can link the link into this video as well too, into our live stream as well too. It's called With Impunity, done by Ellen Pence and Michael Paymar. And it talks about that. It talks exactly about that. It follows the story of a veteran who had come back and who had not only had post-traumatic stress disorder, quote unquote, but also had was causing domestic violence within his relationship, not because of the PTSD. I want to say that. I want to be very clear that PTSD does not cause domestic violence, is not the root cause of it. Same as how we know that anger isn't cause of domestic violence. Alcohol and chemical dependency isn't the cause of domestic violence. What we do know as the causes of domestic violence are male privilege, male power, the environment that doesn't hold men accountable, right? All of that doesn't allows for the violence to actually continue in our communities. And then I think the other thing that I was thinking about too, what you were sharing there, Serrano, about like you stay over you and I stay over here sort of a deal, is it plays right into the way in which we as men invisibly have rules that dictate, and that's what it is. Patriarchy dictates and tells us as men and masculine folks how we should have relationship with one another. How should we be in relationship with one another? How should we be with one another, right? And so oftentimes it's known as like the bro code or the man code. It was funny because I'll share quickly. I was on the plane 2 weeks ago, I don't know, 3 weeks ago, some time ago, but recently I was watching the sitcom. I was strolling through and I was like, okay, I'll just watch something until we land. Watching the sitcom called The Neighbors or The Neighborhood, something like that. And it's on CBS anyways. It's about this white neighbor and this black neighbor who live next door to each other. And so the black neighbor's wife is like, yeah, I want the house to be repainted. Like, let's remodel it because the white neighbor just remodeled theirs. So she goes over and then the black neighbor, the man, he's like, I don't want to remodel. I don't want to do anything, right? And if I'm going to do it, I will do it on my own terms and my own way, right? Because this is my house, this is my domain, whatever. So the black neighbor's wife, she's like, she goes over to the white neighbors and talks to them about it. And she's like, I really want the house to be repainted and remodeled and it'll be nice. And so the white neighbor, the white neighbor, he's like, oh, well, great. I will do it for you all because I love painting. I do a great job painting. That's what I do. And I'm fabulous at it and whatever. And so the black neighbor's wife is like, well, I'm not sure, but yeah, why don't you go ahead and do that, right? So white neighbor, the man, goes over and paints the house, and black neighbor, the man, the husband, doesn't know that his wife had already volunteered the white neighbor, who's the man, to come over to paint. So he comes back home and he's like, wow, the house is great. Whoever's doing the painting is doing a great job. And all of a sudden he finds out that it's actually his neighbor, the white man who's actually painting his house. And he's like, dude, you just violated the bro code. How dare you come over here and paint my house without my knowledge and make me look less than a man, right? Because men are supposed to know how to do those things and take care of their own domain. And so he was all pissed off. And so anyways, long story short, that was the whole 30-minute show, was really about the bro code and the man code and so they kept asking one another throughout the whole show, that episode, about what is the man code and what is the bro code. I forgot what term they were using, but it's that, and some men and masculine folks know it, and some men and masculine folks don't know it. And I think that I've shared this here once before too, is that if you don't follow that code, there's consequences. Every one of us is given that code when we are born, whether we know about that code or not, or those codes or not. We get trained into it, we get socialized into it. And if you don't follow it, you best bet that there's going to be consequences to it, real consequences to it,
Gosh, I'm thinking about so many things. This is really interesting. Um, so I'm like, where do I even start? But one thing I just wanted to throw out there too, Peng, is like some of us actually aren't born into the, that bro code, and some of us come into that later on in our lives through transitions or whatnot. So just want to lift that up too as a thing. But one of the things I was thinking about as we're talking about like pattern, Serrano, I think that's where you said you were, we're talking about the pattern of how often this violence is happening around us in our communities. And one of the very first things I was thinking about was like the women, the children who are experiencing the violence. I was thinking about like, stories I've heard of people here in rural, northern Minnesota, and there are just, we already talked about it at the beginning. There are just so few resources for these folks to actually get away, to find help, to find safe places to be, in order to like get away from that violence. So I guess I just kind of wanted to lift that up, because thinking about like just generally speaking for like, like if we would think about like maybe the most powerful community, or with the most privilege being like the white mainstream kind of community, even across those communities the resources are so sparse. And then when we think about diverse communities, I know my experience with working with trans and gender nonconforming survivors is like the resources are even fewer. Like shelters don't want to accept those kinds of survivors because they don't fit a certain definition of womanhood, or like what women should look like, or who deserves to have safe places and shelters. And so yeah, I guess those are some of the things that I was thinking about. And then also just thinking about like the patriarchy, sexism, male power, all of that, like it's so like rooted and ingrained like in our society, I feel like. And so even like saying those words, it's like I sort of have, like I generally know what that means. And yet like if I really take a minute to think about it, it's like, wow, it is really like woven through like the fabric of, every decision that I make in my own life. Like, and so I don't know, I guess I'm just struggling to wrap my head around that piece of it, because it is so much about like, if we can't talk about those root causes, how are we ever going to prevent this? How is the violence going to decrease, and our folks in our communities become safer? So I guess I'm just curious about that. Like, and as a trans man, my experience is a little bit different with experiencing and using sexism. Definitely have, but and yeah, it's like it almost feels like, where do you even start as a guy when you're trying to think about these things, or as a person in general?
When I think about the patterns, I normally try to find what's that's triggering that, and everything. I think for me, it comes to that inability for us to communicate, just because we're so stuck in that patriarchy, in that fear of showing your feelings, that how men don't want to, you know, give up that too. So it's crazy just to think that the way that we're socializing, how we're, even when we're in relationship with people that we love, we still take advantage of that and abuse of that, even that you will think you're with someone that you love. So that's why when I talk to to my daughters and to the youth groups that I help facilitate, is the importance of understanding what's our relationship. What relationship, the foundation of relationship, trust. You need to trust that people. You need to respect that people, that person that you decide to live with or to be with. In a relationship, and sometimes when there's no trust, when there's no communication. Like every human being, we go through difficult times, and we're gonna be in situations that we don't have that way to vent, to express that pain that we're experiencing. We tend to explode. It happened to women, happened to men, happened to everyone. So how we can learn to ways to don't need to be in that situation, and when if you're in a relationship with someone, or you're with friends, you can put that, patriarchy, all those expectations aside and talk from your heart. So, you know what, I'm going through this, looking for better ways to deal with life, because life is difficult now, going through the pandemic, being at home 24/7. It's hard for everyone. So, I think if we start breaking, those unhealthy habits that we have, we start being more open with the people that we love, we can hopefully prevent that of happening in the past. I don't think humans, they're not born violent. I think life through different ways can make you violent, especially if you experiment a lot of abuse, etc. But everybody, I think, have the capacity of change and to make a difference, not just in your circles, but also in your communities. And through conversations to breaking those unhealthy habits, and we can make a difference. And being vulnerable, that's something that men, it's hard for us, to give up and admit that we make mistakes. That's something that I'm still working on. I'm not perfect, but I want other people to know that, you know what, we can do this. So, so yeah.
I think the vulnerability piece that you're talking about there, Felix, I've seen not only within myself, but within other men and masculine folks in my life, where it's so painful to be able to see people, especially men folks, to get to that place where they're not willing to succumb to what I call, or what I should say is, let me back up, is I call it like surrendering to yourself. Like, you have moments in your life where you're like, okay, I give up. I'm just gonna give in to myself, to whatever shit is, excuse my language, that's happening right now. Because if I don't and I keep fighting it, I know I'm gonna keep drowning, right? Because like, the more I struggle, the more things fall apart. And the more that I try to hang on to everything, the more that actually at the end, I have nothing in my hand. I'm not even holding on to anything, So I think about it as like breaking those unhealthy habits or bad habits that you're talking about, Felix, as quicksand. You don't even know that you're in quicksand, but you think that you're on dry land, but you're really in quicksand, and you keep struggling. And the more you struggle, the more you're slowly being swallowed up, and faster rate, but you don't even recognize that. And it's sad to see that in some of our colleagues and friends and family members who are male identified. And, they're not willing to give in, right? They're not willing to actually say, I actually need help. Or people have been pulling them along the way, or caring for them and helping them, and they still are suspicious of that help, or are saying, I actually don't really need that help in that way, right? Or I don't need it, but in actuality, they really do need that help. They just don't know how to say yes to it, right? Because what would that say about me as a man? And I think that these kinds of things, characteristics or ways of moving, that sometimes I know I do lead us to make bad choices and to make harmful choices actually in our life, and I think that we really have to think about, like what you said, Felix, how we break our own patterns that lead us down a trajectory, and how do we actually build support and find people who are willing to be in our innermost circle, who we can actually unload, and who can be very constructive to us, and who can be very helpful to us, and who can say, hey, I'm going to still be there, but you bet I'm going to be very constructive and critiquing you along the way as well too, and be pissed off at you and be upset at you as well too, right? Because we need those. And I found and have seen that oftentimes, to Serrano's point on isolation there, that we move in our lives as men and masculine folks in very isolated ways to one another. And so we don't have a lot of those folks that we can actually trust to be in our own innermost circle. And when you look at that circle, it's oftentimes just you. And I was having this conversation with the Moments group just this past Tuesday, and many of them were saying, Pheng, the way in which you're talking about that innermost circle, I actually don't have anybody in there. It's like only me, or it's only one other person, very little. And that's very sad to be able to actually see that, you know, and to be able to see them in your most intimate circle of trust and support. There's actually very few people in there. Not to say you have to have a lot of folks, but I think it speaks to the conditions and the environment that allow for men and masculine folks to get to the place where they believe that I'm at my wit's end and I should do what men are taught to do, right? Or masculine identified folks are taught to do, and this is what I'm going to do. And oftentimes it ends up most often in harming other people or impacting the people around them deeply, if not already impacting themselves, right? If not them not already killing themselves. And suicide, for sure, we've talked about this, is the number one cause for men's death, is the leading cause for men's and masculine folks' death, is because of what we're talking about. The unwillingness to succumb to your own self, to give into yourself, and keep struggling in the quicksand, and you're drowning, and everybody's like, here's a life raft, and you're like, I don't want it. Let me keep struggling to get up, because I'm going to show you how manly I am, you know, how strong I am, you know. Very, very sad, I should say.
It's like heartbreaking, because then it becomes like too much for them to like handle. It goes from one end, like something that they think like we think that we need, is like thugging it out, and then it becomes like inevitable line to where you're just like, damn, this shit doesn't actually work. And sadly, that's what that suicide comes from. Is like, if like we know it too, and it's sad, but eventually like that emotion, that thing that you even like kind of forcing yourself to not feel is going to catch up with you. And what does that mean when it does? So I wrote a couple of words down because I'm just struggling with words today. But I wrote down like easy and comfortable, and it's not an excuse, but it's sad that like that's also the things that we do it for, right? We do those things because it's easy and comfortable. Like for some reason it came to my mind, like it's like, why is this so easy for somebody to just be like, no, I'm good, and then yell at somebody because they're actually tired, or to be like, nope, I'm fine, but to hit their partner because they're actually mad, you know, or to be like, nope, I'm cool, but to take away from their partner financially because they are not where they think they need to be financially. And it almost seems like it becomes like, yeah, that's the pattern itself, is like the easy and the comfortability, right? Like and it's fucked up because it's selfish. It's very selfish to do what's easy for you in a relationship in general. That's very selfish, because relationships are hard, right? It's easy to just be like, okay, I know what's going to work. I can steamroll my wife or my partner and let's just get this done. But it's hard to be like, you know what? I'm actually feeling a certain way. I'm feeling emotional and I need to talk about this. I need somebody to talk to. So even with me, and like if I talk to my friends, like I'll just straight up tell them like, you're just sadly doing what's easy too, and you're not seeing that. Like that's easy for you, but it's not easy for her to take in, and you have to see that part. Like in a relationship, you have to do what's hard inevitably to get to what's easy, and that's literally what's going to happen. Like what's hard is to tell your partner like, hey, no, I'm actually not feeling well right now, and this is why, and these are the things that I actually struggle with. And evidently in the future, like in general, people just know how to help you. They know how to actually know how you're feeling. They know how to be on your side, instead of you just pushing them away, right? That's also another thing that's easy and comfortable. It's just pushing people out and just being like, I got this by myself. So it's kind of weird and fucked up how these two like positive words, like easy and comfortable, like can take you to a point where it's very harmful, very dark, and almost fatal to it. It's mostly fatal. So even just like when I talk about it like that, like I love just like being able to have different language on it to help people understand it from different points of views too. Like, no, that's not just what you were like growing up on and stuff. Like you use that shit because it's easy for you. Like that ain't no excuse. Like that shit is easy. Like, you know, and you're doing it because you're comfortable. You ain't never uncomfortable, and that's your problem. Like that's the issue. You know, you're controlling those depths of which you are uncomfortable to which you're comfortable and which everybody else is. So that's what I was really thinking about, is just how like, yeah, how so much of a pattern that becomes to the point where it's like clockwork, sadly. And we all can, I feel like Felix and Sean hit a beautiful like two-headed dragon point for me too, because Sean had asked like, well, when do you like think about, or when does that like come to you? And then Felix also said, like, what I fully believe, and y'all know this is like my motto, I don't believe that nobody like wakes up or is born violent either. But it is nurturing yet challenging, but nurturing more to find out when that actually crossed, right? When did that path cross? When did it come from me becoming a wholesome, like this diddy bopping kid to me using violence in the way that I'm protecting myself, right? So I think like if you think, and that's hard, right? Like I don't say shit that's easy, and I hope I never like come off as things that's easy because it's not. But you have to do that, like you have to. And I'm speaking to men in general, like because you have to. You have to dig deep and figure out when that switch, like, because it's gonna happen. Like you're gonna have something in it that you're denying, that you're blocking, that you're refusing to talk about, you're refusing to feel. For me, I had to realize like that I was still in myself of a person, even with not having a male identified dad around or male role model around at all, right? I had to dig deep and be like, when did I go from just bopping along to like fuck everybody and fuck people, you know what I mean? Like having that be a part of my identity and part of my dominance, like, you know, I'm going to be that man and it's going to be this way. And so I had to dig deep, like, oh no, it came from me not having that and just assuming that that's the way that I have to be, you know, even though my dad wasn't even around to either tell me that it was or was not the way that I had to be. So I just appreciate both of y'all bringing up Sean the question and then Felix like the point of like, well, nobody actually like wakes up violent. Like nobody does. We don't like, we're not born like that. So it is a nurturing and it is hard, but I think it is something that we need to do as men is look at when that emotional shift, or even when that packing started to start, like when you start to like you know, when you go from actually like expressing who you are, like 2 and 3, or you're yelling because you're angry and you're doing, or you're doing the actual things of expressing to, I'm just like coping with shoving it all down. Like, how did that even become a coping skill in my mind? Like, when did that switch? Like, how? So that was kind of like my question, or like my theory is just kind of digging into like from your childhood to now, like, and you got to be aware of it, like be awake, literally, because there's things I think in general that we just like skip over too, like, because I'm 26, so I know for damn sure there's like years that I've like just skipped over habitually for some reason. Right? Whether it was because I was feeling a certain way, whether it's because I don't want to acknowledge now how I was feeling. But I just encourage and challenge men to take that mental and that emotional ride back. Like take that ride back if you need to actually figure out like how you even lose control of yourself to even think that doing these things to other people is okay, and way of you gaining your own control back. So
I'm just really appreciating where this is at, because it's like there's that piece that you're talking about, Serrano, right? Where it's like we have to do that work. We have to like be willing to, and I totally agree. I have those chunks in my own life where it's like, nope, I'm not even opening that door, or some of them are like slightly cracked open, right? Where it's like, okay, I'm gonna look at that, whatever that thing was that hurt me, that changed, you know, like what you're saying, Serrano. It's sort of like those moments that change based on how we decide to react and to act and to treat the people around us. So like that point of like doing our own work, and also like Pheng, what you brought in of like that inner circle, that has me like really thinking, because it's like, you know, when you first said, it's like, okay, well, yeah, I got a dad, I got some brothers, I got some guys I work with, you know, but then it's like, but if I actually like challenge that and like try to go deeper, it's like, how many of those people actually know me? Like they know like the things I'm struggling with, the things that bring me super, you know, intense amounts of joy, like how well am I actually showing like who I am, or am I just showing up and like talking about the sports game, you know, or like those things that are easy. Again, it's like those things that we're just so used to, like, this is what we talk about, this is what's important to us. But at the end of the day, like, it just doesn't feel like it even comes close to like the relationships and the potential impact and the real impact that we have on the people around us, and like how are we actually thinking about that versus like these easy, comfortable, like, yeah, I'm gonna just turn on the TV rather than like have a conversation with my wife about like, hey, do we need to like clean the house today, or like checking in on stuff like that. So I guess my sort of like last thoughts are like just to encourage like people who are watching and us here too, right, to like do that check of like who is the inner circle, or like the circle of trust, or whatever. It makes me think of Meet the Parents, that movie, the inner circle of trust. But yeah, it's like, okay, and then like that's a part of it, right? Then it's like, I mean, I don't know how many of us on this call have like, 3, 4, 5 people like that in our lives, but it's like doing the work to like deepen those relationships. And that means like opening up. That means talking about like where I come from, things that I care about, and things that I don't understand, or like, like that asking for help piece, like, woo, all of it is like, I'm just realizing that so many of my decisions are based on that, like, what are people going to think of me? They're going to think I'm less of a man, if I don't know how to fix this clogged drain in my basement that just exploded this morning. I called a plumber, So that's real life. But, like that is work of taking the time to be like, okay, the game was good. And like, how are you really doing? Like, how am I really doing? Where are we at?
We do have a question from the chat to maybe segue a little bit, but I think it probably perhaps ties into even this conversation, because to Serrano's point, the relationship with ourselves is so vitally important as well too. And not only that, in terms of understanding who we are and what we are and how we identify, to Sean's points earlier on, and our relationship to our family, right? In terms of our NATO family and how they support us as we may think about our identities as we move, right? And think about how we are masculine or male identified or man, and the way in which we portray and express masculinity and manhood throughout our lifetime may cause and may shape how people interact with us and how people move with us and how people relate to us. I know that oftentimes I am not in many relationships with really masculine men who are like really like gung-ho on things, the kind you guys know, I think might know and understand the kind of men those men are, like really rigid and really hold to tooth and nail and what it means to be a man, and are like, I think they're loaded on steroids, but that's probably my own bias on it, which isn't true, but they probably have a really strong testosterone that might be more truer, I should say. Anyways, but I think in relationship to all of that, I think that this is probably where that question comes from, is, do we have any tips on how to come out as trans to our family? Or to families. So any of you seen it? We know that there's tons of other organizations that do support people and walk people, and probably would give a lot more better suggestions than I think any one of us here probably could give. Trans Plus being one of them as well too, that could probably do that. But I think it's a moment for us to really think about like how and what does that look like for queer folks. And I always think that my learning as somebody who identifies as cisgender and straight is that if a person who identifies as queer, LGBTQ, or gender nonconforming or trans, they aren't able to come out to me, it's probably because I did something wrong. Whatever in me didn't allow them to feel safe to come out to me, right? So it's not so much about them having to navigate the conditions to actually come out to me as a family member who doesn't identify in the LGBTQ community, but I have to do my work, right? I have to do my work, and I think that the burden should not definitely be on trans folks or LGBTQ identified people to actually be saying, hey, let me share with all of you my identity. But I think that we have to create the conditions as cisgender straight people. We have to create the conditions that allow for people to actually feel safe and be who they are, like accept them where they are. And if we haven't done that, probably our folks are not going to share their identities with us, and we better not feel bad, because it's our job to create those conditions as straight cisgender people in a very heteropatriarchal world that we live in, right? So that doesn't probably answer the question directly, but I do want to share that because that's so vitally important for us as cisgender straight people to really create the conditions that allow for trans folks, trans men in this instance, and trans masculine folks to actually really express themselves and be who they want to be. And I'm not perfect at that. I know I still have my own transphobia that I have to actually work through and still work around, and my own homophobia that I'm still continuously practicing. Just because I've been doing this and thinking about those things for the last 20 some years doesn't mean that every trans person is going to come out to me all of a sudden, and I don't expect that either, because that's theirs to hold.
Yeah, I'll just hop in. I just want to say I appreciate that too, Pheng, like naming that like our allies, our cisgender heterosexual allies, like are the ones who create those spaces. Like they have the power to make places safer. And we actually need you to do that work. And as a trans man myself, when I think about tips on coming out to your family, I think the number one thing, and it goes right along with this conversation, is safety is kind of always my main concern. That's the kind of the first question I ask folks is, do you think it's going to be safe for you to do that with your family? And we don't always know, but I think oftentimes we have a good sense of, where our parents, where our family members stand on different types of people. And so that's what I would encourage folks to think about first, is that safety piece. And then secondly, I just highly encourage you to reach out to groups like Trans Plus. There are groups like Pheng mentioned, throughout Minnesota. Trans Plus is kind of the big one in northern Minnesota. You can find us at www.transplus.org. You can send us an email. You can connect with other trans folks who have like gone through this process, who can share, what that was like for us, and can kind of help you along the way. So that's kind of the things that came to my mind. Safety, and then connecting with trans community.
What I can say to be, go ahead, Pheng. What I can say is to be true to yourself. We know we live in a community they're very homophobic, and we live following these expectations of how we need to live our lives. Surround yourself of people that understand you, that respect you, and understand there's a lot of people that their allies are gonna back you up and never feel alone. There's always people out there that understand what you're going through, and they're gonna support you, and they're gonna be there for you. But in my experience with friends, it's been really hard to hear their stories. The rejection from those loved ones that they're supposed to love you. And they give you their back. It really hurts. As a parent, I always been very supportive, and I open those doors to anyone. To understand that we're here. If you need to talk to someone, we're here to listen to you, to support you. But like Sean said, safety first. Be sure that you're that you're in the place that you need to be, and you feel comfortable. Have this conversation with your loved ones. But always remember, there's people that respect you, love you, they're here for you, and reach to us anyway. That if we can support you in any way.
Well, I know we're getting close to our time where we're wrapping up, and just want to say thank you again to the person who joined us and asked that question. Again, we always want to hear from y'all, you who are watching. Share those questions, those ideas and comments with us, because we really want to bring those into our conversations, because that's real life stuff that we're all dealing with. So thank you to you for asking that question. And I just want to thank each of you for, this conversation, because I think, those of us who are on this call who do this work, or who work, closely with advocates, it's really easy for us to sort of think, well, we know how this works, and yet there's always more, at least for myself, where it's like just constantly going deeper and deeper, and I feel like that learning and those moments are huge as we're trying to really change society. We're trying to redefine masculinity. And so, we just want to thank all of you who are able to join us today as we're live. And for any of you who are watching this after the fact, we're just very grateful that you are choosing to join our conversations, that you also value healthy masculinity and preventing violence in our communities. And on that note, we want to say a quick thank you to our philanthropy partners, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota and the Novo Foundation, for all of their support to allow us really to continue these conversations. And as a reminder, we are chatting at the kitchen table here every other Thursday at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. So our next conversation will be on Thursday, 2 weeks from today, November 4th at noon. Don't forget, like our Facebook page, share our conversations, and start having some of these at your own kitchen table or with your friends, when you're watching the game. Ask a question like what we're talking about here, and see what can happen. So thank you again, and we wish you all well.